What is up, YouTube? My name is Trinity, and welcome back to another Spooktober video. Tonight, we're going to be discussing why the next Jurassic World film needs to be a rated R horror movie. Now, do I think this is very likely? Probably not, since all 6 movies so far have been PG-13 to my knowledge. However, in a world full of reboots and remakes constantly coming at us, I feel like this is the one remake that I want to see. A remake of the original movie, but make it a more faithful adaptation to the book. For those of you that don't know, the Jurassic Park and World franchise is based off of the 2 novels by Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park and the Lost World. While characters and major plot points in the books are, for the most part, adhered to, there's a lot that is also changed and cut out. And I think that the changes made in some ways are to the narrative's detriment, even though I feel like Steven Spielberg making the original movie made the right choice in making it more of a PG-13 adventure movie that everyone could enjoy. I don't think Jurassic Park would have gotten the same love and pop culture relevance that it still has how many decades later if it had been a rated R horror movie, because a lot of fans of Jurassic Park, myself included, started out as kids. However, something that everybody criticizes about remakes is that they're telling the same story, whereas this remake could be more faithful to the source material while also growing up with the original audience. Michael Crichton's novels are much more disturbing than the movie goes into, because even though they touch on the fact that the dinosaurs aren't real, that their genetic codes are supplemented with DNA from modern day animals, they still function how we imagine dinosaurs functioned in real life. I remember a certain part of the novel, though I couldn't find the exact page. Somebody is just listing off minor inconveniences with the dinosaurs, but these inconveniences are showing behavioral issues that likely aren't natural to the actual species that has allegedly been brought back after millions of years. Also, to get to the more obvious point, it is much more graphic than the original movie shows. It cuts out a lot of the parts, it cuts out a lot of the mystery and the horror aspect, the constant dread that you feel. And I think that would all work so well. We've seen with these Jurassic Park analog horror videos that are popping up all over YouTube that dinosaurs can be scary. Jurassic Park can be extremely scary. Lean into the conspiracy concept with InGen. Lean into how these dinosaurs are not the animals they're supposed to be. They're unnatural. Their behavior is incorrect. It's weird. It's creepy. The velociraptors specifically, they're just killing machines. They don't function like coherent animals. So today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different on my channel. Rather than just talking about it, I'm going to be reading you 3 passages from the actual Jurassic Park novel. 2 of these scenes you don't even see in the original movie, but it won't be spoiling much because it is part of the prologue. And then the 3rd scene is going to be the death of Dennis Nedry, which we do see on screen to a degree, but it's in a very hidden, implied way. We don't actually see what happens to him. So without further ado, let's get into Jurassic Park. The tropical rain fell in drenching sheets, hammering the corrugated roof of the clinic building, roaring down the metal gutters, splashing on the ground in a torrent. Roberta Carter sighed and stared out the window. From the clinic, she could hardly see the beach or the ocean beyond, cloaked in low fog. It wasn't what she had expected when she had come to the fishing village of Bahia Nasco, on the west coast of Costa Rica, to spend 2 months as a visiting physician. Bobby Carter had expected sun and relaxation. After 2 grueling years of residency in emergency medicine at Michael Reese in Chicago. She had been in Bahia Nasco for 3 weeks now, and it had rained every day. Everything else was fine. She liked the isolation of Bahia Nasco and the friendliness of its people. Costa Rica had one of the 20 best medical systems in the world, and even in this remote coastal village, the clinic was well maintained, amply supplied. Her paramedic, Manuel Aragon, was intelligent and well-trained. Bobby was able to practice a level of medicine equal to what she had practiced in Chicago. But the rain, the constant, unending rain. Across the examination room, Manuel cocked his head. "Listen," he said. "Believe me, I hear it," Bobby said. "No, listen." And then she caught it, another sound blended with the rain, a deeper rumble that built and emerged until it was clear. The rhythmic thumping of a helicopter. She thought, they can't be flying in weather like this. But the sound built steadily, and then the helicopter burst low through the ocean fog and roared overhead, circled, and came back. She saw the helicopter swing back over the water near the fishing boats, then ease sideways to the rickety wooden dock and back towards the beach. It was looking for a place to land. It was a big-bellied Sikorsky with a blue stripe on the side, with the words InGen Construction. That was the name of the construction company building a new resort on one of the offshore islands. The resort was said to be spectacular and very complicated. Many of the local people were employed in the construction, which had been going on for more than 2 years. Bobby could imagine it. One of those huge American resorts with swimming pools and tennis courts, where guests could play and drink their daiquiris without having any contact with the real life of the country. Bobby wondered what was so urgent on that island that the helicopter would fly in this weather. Through the windshield, she saw the pilot exhale in relief as the helicopter settled onto the wet sand of the beach. Uniformed men jumped out and flung open the big side door. She heard frantic shouts in Spanish, and Manuel nudged her. They were calling for a doctor. 2 black crewmen carried a limp body towards her, while a white man barked orders. The white man had a yellow slicker. Red hair appeared around the edges of his Mets baseball cap. "Is there a doctor here?" he called to her as she ran up. "I'm Dr. Carter," she said. The rain fell in heavy drops, pounding her head and shoulders. The red-haired man frowned at her. She was wearing cut-off jeans and a tank top. She had a stethoscope over her shoulder, the belt already rusted from the salt air. "Ed Regis, we've got a very sick man here, doctor." "Then you better take him to San Jose," she said. San Jose was the capital, just 20 minutes away by air. "We would, but we can't get over the mountains in this weather. You have to treat him here." Bobby trotted along the injured man as they carried him to the clinic. He was a kid, no older than 18. Lifting away the blood-soaked shirt, she saw a big slashing rip along his shoulder and another on the leg. What happened to him? "Construction accident," Ed shouted. He fell. One of the backhoes ran him over. The kid was pale, shivering, unconscious. Manuel stood by the bright green door of the clinic, waving his arm. The men brought the body through and set it on the table in the center of the room. Manuel started an intravenous line, and Bobby swung the light over the kid and bent to examine the wounds. Immediately, she could see that it did not look good. The kid would almost certainly die. A big, tearing laceration ran from his shoulder down his torso. At the edge of the wound, the flesh was shredded. At the center, the shoulder was dislocated, pale bones exposed. A second slash cut through the heavy muscles of his thigh, deep enough to reveal the pulse of the femoral artery below. Her first impression was that his leg had been ripped open. "Tell me again about this injury," she said. "I didn't see it," Ed said. "They say a backhoe dragged him." "Because it almost looks as if he was mauled," Bobby Carter said, probing the wound. Like most emergency room physicians, she could remember in detail patients she had seen even years before. She had seen 2 maulings. One was a 2-year-old child who had been attacked by a Rottweiler dog. The other was a drunken circus attendant who had had an encounter with a Bengal tiger. Both injuries were similar. There is a characteristic look to an animal attack. "Mauled?" Ed said. No, it was backhoe, believe me." Ed licked his lips as he spoke. He was edgy, acting as if he had done something wrong. Bobby wondered why. If they were using inexperienced local workmen on the resort construction, they must have accidents all the time. Manuel said, "Do you want lavage?" "Yes," she said, "after you block him." She bent lower, probed the wound with her fingertips. If an earth mover had rolled over him, dirt would be forced deep into the wound. But there wasn't any dirt, just a slippery, slimy foam. And the wound had a strange odor. A kind of rotten stench, a smell of death and decay. She had never smelled anything like it before. How long ago did this happen? An hour. Again, she noticed how tense Ed Regis was. He was one of those eager, nervous types. And he didn't look like a construction foreman, more like an executive. He was obviously out of his depth. Somehow she didn't think she was seeing mechanical trauma. It just didn't look right. No soil contamination of the wound site and no crush injury component. Mechanical trauma of any sort, an auto injury, a factory accident, almost always had some component of crushing. But there was none. Instead, the man's skin was shredded, ripped across his shoulder and again across his thigh. It really did look like a maul. On the other hand, most of the body was unmarked, which was unusual for an animal attack. She looked again at the head, the arms, the hands. The hands. She felt a chill when she looked at the kid's hands. There were short, slashing cuts on both palms and bruises on the wrists and forearms. She had worked in Chicago long enough to know what that meant. "All right," she said. "Wait outside." "Why?" Ed said, alarmed. He didn't like that. "Do you want me to help him or not?" she said, and she pushed him out the door and closed it in his face. She didn't know what was going on, but she didn't like it. Manuel hesitated. "I continue to wash?" "Yes," she said. She reached for her little Olympus point-and-shoot. She took several photos of the injury, shifting her light for a better view. It really did look like bites, she thought. Then the kid groaned, and she put her camera aside and bent towards him. His lips moved, his tongue thick. "Raptor," he said. "Velociraptor." At those words, Manuel froze, stepped back in horror. "What does it mean?" Bobby said. Manuel shook his head. "I do not know, doctor. Velociraptor no es español." "No?" It sounded to her like Spanish. "Then please continue to wash him." "No, doctor." He wrinkled his nose. "Bad smell." And he crossed himself. Bobby looked again at the slippery foam streaked across the wound. She touched it, rubbing it between her fingers. It almost seemed like saliva. The injured boy's lips moved. "Raptor," he whispered. In a tone of horror, Manuel said, "It bit him." "What bit him?" "Raptor." "What's a raptor?" "It means hoopia." Bobby frowned. The Costa Ricans were not especially superstitious, but she had heard about the hoopia mentioned in the village before. They were said to be night ghosts, faceless vampires who kidnap small children. According to the belief, the hoopia had once lived in the mountains of Costa Rica, but now inhabited the islands offshore. Manuel was backing away, murmuring and crossing himself. "It is not normal, this smell," he said. "It is the hoopia." Bobby was about to order him back to work when the injured youth opened his eyes and sat straight up on the table. Manuel shrieked in terror. The injured boy moaned and twisted his head, looking left and right with wide, staring eyes, and then explosively vomited blood. He went immediately into convulsions, his body vibrating, and Bobby grabbed for him, but he shuddered off the table onto the concrete floor. He vomited again. There was blood everywhere. Ed opened the door, saying, "What the hell is happening?" And when he saw the blood, he turned away, his hand to his mouth. Bobby was grabbing for a stick to put in the boy's clenched jaws, but even as she did it, she knew it was hopeless. And with a final spastic jerk, he relaxed and lay still. She bent to perform mouth-to-mouth, but Manuel grabbed her shoulder fiercely, pulling her back. "No," he said, "the hoopia will cross over you." "Manuel, for God's sake, no!" He stared at her fiercely. "No, you do not understand these things." Bobby looked at the body on the ground and realized that it didn't matter. There was no possibility of resuscitating him. Manuel called for the men, who came back into the room and took the body away. Ed appeared, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, muttering, "I'm sure you did all you could." And then she watched as the men took the body away, back to the helicopter, and it lifted thunderously into the sky. "It is better," Manuel said. Bobby was thinking about the boy's hands. They had been covered with cuts and bruises, in the characteristic pattern of defense wounds. She was quite sure he had not died in a construction accident. He had been attacked, and he had held up his hands against his attacker. "Where is this island they've come from?" she asked. "In the ocean, perhaps 120 miles offshore." "Pretty far for a resort," she said. Manuel watched the helicopter. "I hope they never come back." Well, she thought, at least she had pictures, but when she turned back to the table, she saw that her camera was gone. The tropical rain fell in great drenching sheets, hammering the corrugated roof of the clinic in Bahia Nasco. It was nearly midnight. Power had been lost in the storm, and the midwife, Elena Morales, was working by flashlight when she heard a squeaking, chirping sound. Thinking that it was a rat, she quickly put a compress on the forehead of the mother and went into the next room to check on the newborn baby. As her hand touched the doorknob, she heard the chirping again, and she relaxed. Evidently, it was just a bird, flying in the window to get out of the rain. Costa Rican said that when a bird came to visit a newborn child, it brought good luck. Elena opened the door. The infant lay in a wicker basket, swaddled in a light blanket, only its face exposed. Around the rim of the basket, 3 dark green lizards crouched like gargoyles. When they saw Elena, they cocked their heads and stared at her curiously, but they did not flee. In the light of her flashlight, Elena saw blood dripping from their snouts. Softly chirping, one lizard bent down, and with a quick shake of its head, tore a ragged chunk of flesh from the baby. Elena rushed forward, screaming, and the lizards fled into the darkness. But long before she reached the bassinet, she could see what had happened to the infant's face, and she knew the child must be dead. The lizard scattered into the rainy night, chirping and squealing, leaving behind only bloody three-toed tracks, like birds. Nedry started back, heading towards the glow of the car's headlights. He was drenched and miserable. He heard the soft, hooting cry once more, and this time he paused. That hadn't really sounded like an owl, and it seemed to be close by, in the jungle somewhere off to his right. As he listened, he heard a crashing sound in the underbrush, then silence. He waited and heard it again. It sounded distinctly like something big, moving slowly through the jungle towards him. Something big, something near. A big dinosaur. Get out of here. Nedry began to run. He made a lot of noise as he ran, but even so, he could hear the animal crashing through the foliage and hooting. It was coming closer. Stumbling over tree roots in the darkness, clawing his way past dripping branches, he saw the jeep ahead, and the light shining around the vertical wall of the barrier made him feel better. In a moment, he'd be in the car, and he'd get the hell out of here. He scrambled around the barrier, and then he froze. The animal was already there, but it wasn't close. The dinosaur stood 40 feet away, at the edge of the illumination from the headlamps. Nedry hadn't taken the tour, so he hadn't seen the different types of dinosaurs, but this one was strange looking. The 10-foot-tall body was yellow with black spots, and along the head ran a pair of red V-shaped crests. The dinosaur didn't move, but again gave its soft hooting cry. Nedry waited to see if it would attack. It didn't. Perhaps the headlights from the jeep frightened it, forcing it to keep its distance like a fire. The dinosaur stared at him and then snapped its head in a single swift motion. Nedry felt something smack wetly against his chest. He looked down and saw a dripping glob of foam on his rain-soaked shirt. He touched it curiously, not comprehending. It was spit. The dinosaur had spit on him. It was creepy, he thought. He looked back at the dinosaur and saw the head snap again and immediately felt another wet smack against his neck, just above the shirt collar. He wiped it away with his hand. Jesus, it was disgusting. But the skin on his neck was already starting to tingle and burn, and his hand was tingling too. It was almost like he had been touched with acid. Nedry opened the car door, glancing back at the dinosaur to make sure it wasn't going to attack, and felt a sudden, excruciating pain in his eyes, stabbing like spikes into the back of his skull. And he squeezed his eyes shut and gasped with the intensity of it and threw his hands up to cover his eyes, and felt the slippery foam trickling down the sides of his nose. Spit. The dinosaur had spit in his eyes. Even as he realized it, the pain overwhelmed him, and he dropped to his knees, disoriented, wheezing. He collapsed onto his side, cheek pressed against the wet ground, and his breath coming in thin whistles above the constant, ever-screaming pain that caused flashing spots of light to appear behind his tightly shut eyelids. The earth shook beneath him, and Nedry knew the dinosaur was moving. He could hear its soft hooting cry, and despite the pain, he forced his eyes open, and still he saw nothing but flashing spots against black. Slowly, the realization came to him. He was blind. The hooting was louder as Nedry scrambled to his feet and staggered back against the side panel of the car as a wave of nausea and dizziness swept over him. The dinosaur was close now. He could feel it coming close. He was dimly aware of its snorting breath, but he couldn't see. He couldn't see anything, and his terror was extreme. He stretched out his hands, waving them wildly in the air to ward off the attack he knew was coming. And then there was a new searing pain, like a fiery knife in his belly, and Nedry stumbled, reaching blindly down to touch the ragged edge of his shirt, and then a thick, slippery mass that was surprisingly warm, and with horror he realized he was holding his own intestines in his hands. The dinosaur had torn him open. His guts had fallen out. Nedry fell to the ground and landed on something scaly and cold. It was the animal's foot. And then there was a new pain on both sides of his head. The pain grew worse, and as he was lifted to his feet, he knew the dinosaur had his head in its jaws. And the horror of the realization was followed by a final wish that it would all be ended soon. I hope you guys enjoyed this little read-along that I did, and I hope you enjoyed the concept and the idea that I'm trying to push. Do I think that the new Jurassic World movie is going to be a horror movie? Probably not. but I do think it's a cool concept that maybe somebody could take advantage of in the future. And I would absolutely love to see it because it would breathe a sense of newness and freshness into this well-beloved series. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the like button and share this video with any other dinosaur enthusiasts just like me. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you'll be notified anytime I upload. And finally, if you're enjoying our Spooktober celebration, be sure to check out the Spooktober playlist that I'll have linked at the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.